What would you say are the biggest mistakes that you're seeing American churches make, specifically preparing young people for the challenges that they face?
If you can't ask tough questions at church, where can you ask them? I guess I'm Buddhist now, so I was fired. Hey, everybody, I'm Chris.
I'm Brett.
And welcome to the One Life Next Gen channel. Hey, we've got something special today because I did youth ministry for 17 years. Middle school, mainly middle school, but also some college ministry, some high school ministry in there. And you did college ministry?
I did high school ministry for like a month, and then I did college ministry for about 10 years, yeah.
Okay. And you've been the pastor of One Life for
a long time, ever since I've been
15 years?
Yeah.
And then before that, you were a pastor at another church?
Yeah, so you're doing the math. Yeah, I've been around a little while.
He's an old seasoned pastor. It's a seasoned pastor. But I saw this clip, Frank Turek, who is from crossexamine.org. He also goes to college campuses and does debates with atheist people, but he also has Q&A sessions and things like that. But he made this video. Somebody asked him about youth ministry and what the problem with youth ministry is. And he answers. He gives two parts. And so the first part is really focused on youth ministry. And I have some problems with it, but I want to talk to you about that a little bit. But the second part, he really gets into the modern church and kind of some of the problems he sees there. Okay. And I would really like your take on this because if you know anything about Brett, I'm anticipating he might get mad at this one. So stay
Brett, I'll keep my cool.
I want to watch Brett yell. That's what I want. So, and I will say things to see if I can get Brett to punch me by the end of this video. So stay tuned.
That'll be the win.
All right. Well, let's check this out. Here's what this guy's question is, and then what Frank Turek responds.
From your experience working with churches all around America, what would you say are the biggest mistakes that you're seeing American churches make, specifically in how they approach youth ministry and preparing young people for the challenges that they face?
Two things. Number one thing that we make a mistake on, I think, is that we don't teach them why Christianity is true. We don't teach them how to think, because it's very difficult for the mind to rejoice, or for the heart to rejoice in what the mind doubts. And all these other world religions out there and worldviews use testimonies just like we do. Not that testimonies can never be used, but a Mormon can have a testimony, and Jehovah's Witness, a Muslim, a Hindu, a Buddhist, they can all have testimonies. This changed my life. So what? You know what differentiates us from those other worldviews? We actually have evidence that our worldview is true, that it's objective evidence in the real world that God does exist and Jesus did rise from the dead, and the scriptures are actually telling the truth. So we ought to teach them the evidence that it's true. And that's why we have the book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. We have curriculum around it. We have online courses around it. That's the number one thing I think is a problem. We're not teaching evidence that is true, because it's not a suggestion. When Peter says, always be ready to give an answer for the hope that you have, give a reason for the hope that you have, it's a command. The second.
Okay, so he starts off with saying, hey, the church has done a bad job of, or especially youth ministry, of why we believe what we believe. So some of the apologetic stuff, and that's what
I'm not mad at all.
Yeah, because that's one of the things I believe that One Life has done very well, this church, of really equipping people to think through, because we say, bring your brain to church. That's one of our qualities around here, because we want people to wrestle with those things and to have those questions. Because if they can't ask them here at church and we're not answering them, then where are they going to ask them? Because I remember, like, when I did youth ministry, we had a couple of intellectual middle schoolers, I'll put it that way, that they would
always do.
Yeah, they would ask tough questions. And
absolutely.
And one of them I remember repeatedly of him, this guy wrestling with it. It was, hey, if God, again, after the flood, or right before the flood, he's like, hey, he regretted making humans. And he's like, well, how can God have regrets? And that, there was a big sticking point in his faith, and it was something that we would wrestle with and kind of talk through, because that is a tough question. And if you can't ask tough questions at church, where can you ask them? Because the world out there is going to tell you, oh yeah, it's a tough question because it's not real and it doesn't exist and all that. And so how have you kind of addressed that as a pastor, but also when you did college ministry, how did you get the why behind it instead of just...
Well, and you've probably seen this research. I think it was Fuller University did research into why and how faith is retained in in places where it's retained, in families that it's retained. They said, I think they said the number one quality was you had a place to ask things, and it wasn't shouted down. For me, that's it. It's more about the environment of being able to ask without being looked at like you're some kind of freak show or something. Like you can have and then you can get into an intelligent conversation about it. You don't even have to be in a place that answers the question well. It's just being able to do that. So back in college ministry, I remember that because I would go out to the college campus and I would hear from students when they came out of their classes, and they would talk about what professors had challenged them with and everything. Yeah. And we at least talked about it, and that's what they needed to get through. It wasn't anything beyond that. But I had a real good friend of mine that helped start One Life, and he said he was just one of these very brainiac type people, and he had those same kind of questions as a kid, but he was in a church that really shouted that down. Oh, just shut up and believe. Yeah. It was that. It was a huge turnoff for him, and he did fade off. So for me, it's always been about creating the culture. We want to give answers, but creating the culture of questioning to me is more important than that even. And even in your own household, I think.
Yeah. And so the problem I had with his answer though was that, he says he goes to churches, but how does he know that? Because he's not a pastor at a church. I don't know that he does a lot of stuff with youth ministry. And maybe he hears this from the college students. Yeah. They're like, yeah, I grew up Christian, but I didn't. And maybe he's heard that. But because for a while, and I think it's still out there, the statistic is anywhere from 50% to 80%, depending on what study you look at. People in high school ministry graduate from high school, they say graduate from their faith. And guys in college, because they are faced with these things and these challenges of the professor saying, hey, yeah, the Bible's a fiction book, just like these other fiction books we're going to be studying. And so you're like, oh, wait, no, I thought.
No, we would try to give principles and tell stories out of that. And there's so many ways you can go with this. But one of the things is, though, he can say, well, churches don't do that. Well, I've been in church where we did that for years because that was one of the drivers in college ministry for me. It was a driver. I wanted that to be a part of things, but in my own household. But my kids still went through doubts and struggles and issues because college is not just about a professor talking about evolution. It's the environment, it's the partying, it's the philosophies, it's a lot of different things all at once. And so equipping kids for that needs to go because. Also, there's some kids that couldn't care less about a question like that, Yeah. They care about other things, like even political ideas or moral questions around sexuality or whatever else. Those are other things. And so I don't think it's quite as simple as he's talking about. But and to your point, churches do that, maybe more than he thinks.
Well, and the part about everybody has a testimony. Because Muslims and Mormons and Buddhists, they can have these testimonies. And so what makes our testimonies different than other people's? And so that's where, yes, knowing the scripture is very important, knowing how we got our Bible, all those things are important. And so I think that it was a good point, but just to say we just worry about people sharing their testimonies, no, we wanted people to share the gospel.
It's a caricature, and I understand where it comes from and there's also other things I'm a big evidence guy. I love that stuff. But the thing that helped me the most was it was stuff by Francis Schaeffer for those who care. But he was, no, Francis Schaeffer's the man. But no, the way he thought is very different from the way Frank Turek thinks. And he's not an evidence guy. He was more of a philosophy guy that really helped you to boil things down on what you were being told in the modern world and how to sort all those things out. And it was revolutionary to me. But I learned that in college. Yeah. I was like, okay, that really helps me. But that's my personality and kind of what I needed. Other people need evidence. Other people need kind of walk through other subject matter.
And I think the reason I take issue is because doing youth ministry for 17 years.
You're the one getting mad.
I did it right, Frank Turek. You don't know me. You never came to my church.
I worked my fingers from the bone.
We did. There was a trip that we took to Fort Wayne, Indiana. Because they have
the intellectual center of.
Yeah. Well, they have a huge Burmese population. And so we would take our students to a Buddhist monastery and go, and they would watch kids their age recite all the Buddhist things. And we would talk to a monk, and the monk gave us basically their 10 commandments, which is very similar to the Christian 10 commandments. And so I said, hey, well, what makes you different than a Buddhist? And if you follow these things, don't commit adultery,
that's a great
lie,
idea.
Steal. And they're like, oh, I guess I'm Buddhist now. So I was fired. No, I didn't happen.
Well, there's also, to that point, there's exposure and interpretation, there's always that thing of what do you isolate your kids from and what do you expose them to with interpretations, a whole other thing as well, because, and that's a great point. you have to have a place where you can process this stuff. You want them to see things and then process it. So it's not just have this list of the 10 reasons why we believe Jesus rose again from the dead. Here's the evidence points. Because there's other questions that can be a lot more vexing. Like, or if you have a teenage friend, I had a teenage friend of mine that was hit by a car and killed when he was 14. So I was dealing with, it didn't really have to do with traditional evidence stuff. It was a much deeper question about why him and not me and all those things.
Yeah. And our students here at One Life are going on a trip to Utah.
That's true.
Yeah, Salt Lake City, Utah but they're being immersed in Christian culture and beliefs and apologetics and those things, but also like, hey, here's what Mormons believe and here's why they believe what they believe. And so we want our students to be able to have those intelligent conversations with them, but while maintaining their own faith and not just like, oh, I think I'm Mormon now. Because yeah, you don't want to just throw them out there and like, well, here's this belief. You're like, well, that sounds kind of good. So, but yeah.
Here's the frustration too, that I can say, having tried to teach in a lot of different ways. And here in One Life Network, we do this with Braxton Hunter, and he's a big time apologist. Is apologetics people only care about it when they care about it. It's hard to get people to care. Yeah. When you start stacking up evidence, this is all the reasons why Jesus rose again from the dead. They're looking at their watch. A lot of them, teenagers, adults, everybody, until the moment that they have a teenage son who's like rebelling against it all. Then it matters. Yeah. So trying to do it preemptively is a little harder than what he may be creating the impression of. But still, I'm not mad even a little bit.
Well, let's get into this next part then. Let's get ready to rumble.
And this is going to frost some people, but I don't care. I'm leaving tomorrow. The second major problem I think the church has is the church thinks that church is for unbelievers. The church is not for unbelievers. According to Paul, the church is to equip the saints to do ministry. Jesus did not say make believers. He said make disciples. And the problem with the seeker model is it tries to orient its services to unbelievers. Is it any wonder that A, we don't make disciples that way, or B, the people in the pews start looking more like the culture than Christians? Because what are you going to do if you're orienting your services to unbelievers all the time? You're never going to talk about the hard issues. You're never going to talk about transgenderism, homosexuality, abortion, all these things that are tearing lives apart. You're never going to talk about Charlie Kirk or Roe v. Wade being overturned. You're never going to talk about these things. You're never going to talk about the furries. You're never going to talk about pornography because you might offend somebody. Do you realize that Jesus never compromised his message to attract the seekers? Neither did Paul, neither did Peter. Do you realize in John chapter 6, Jesus says, he gives his bread of life speech, and then they say, this is a hard teaching, who can accept it? And it says many of his disciples stopped following him then. He didn't change his message. He didn't say, oh, don't leave. If you don't like that, I have other convictions. If we're not trying to make disciples, what are we doing? What's the point? And I don't know, I may get into trouble for saying this, but I'm so tired of skinny jeans and fog machines. Okay?
Amen. Amen.
I'm tired of the pastor looking like he just came from cleaning his garage. Okay? Have some reverence. Look, I came out of the Catholic faith because I'm from New Jersey and it's the law. There is some reverence in the Catholic service. I'm not a Catholic. There's a lot of problems with the Catholic Church, but a lot of people are being attracted to the Catholic Church now because of the reverence, because of the beauty. As Protestants, we need to recover some of that. It's not all about attracting people and showing how hip you are.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
All right. Brett, the church isn't for unbelievers. Your thoughts?
Or the church is from...
See, I knew it'd get him. All right.
Well, for one, it's not that clean. Yes, the church is for believers, but to say it's not for unbelievers is just a false dichotomy, biblically and otherwise. Because first of all, Paul talks about if an unbeliever walks in, Jesus was known and criticized for being. I love it in Luke 15. It says the tax collectors.
Tax collectors.
Tax collectors and sinners. We cleared up I was the older guy. Were drawing near to him to hear him. That was an offensive thing to the religious people, and they called him out on that. And of course, the famous story of Zacchaeus. Well, he went into his house. Now, do you think that they would have been mad at him if Jesus then stood up on Zacchaeus' table and started chewing him out and talking about how horrible he was and how he didn't vote right and how he wasn't for Roe versus Wade and all that kind of thing? Well, of course not. No, he was offended because of that. That's where that comes from. And here at One Life, and I've been involved in so-called seeker churches most of my career, gladly and unapologetically, because it came from relatability issues. Yeah. It wasn't trying to be hip issues. It was relatability issues. It's the same thing that, by the way, Frank Turek standing there, he's against the skinny jeans, but he's standing there and he's not wearing a robe and he's not wearing a suit and he's got his shirt untucked and he's got his cool little black pants and he's trying to be as stylish. And ironically, he's standing on a stage. It looks remarkably like ours. He's got his cool graphic in the back. Yeah. And I guarantee you at Cross-Examine Ministries, he had someone make him a cool looking graphic. Yeah. Some of this stuff, when people use that caricature, they're the very people that are doing the exact same thing. Right. It's just that you can't do it as a church. I guarantee it, his YouTube channel and all his merchandising and all his stuff has that clean, cool look. Yeah. But he's doing it because of relatability issues. He's not trying to, oh, look how cool I am. He's just saying, this is how our culture works and looks. Now, can you go too far with that? Yes. And where those lines are, I'm not exactly sure, but I do have a comment about the Catholic thing here in a moment, but I won't monopolize the whole thing. And so far, I'm not mad. I'm irritated, but I'm not mad.
But the skinny jeans and fog machines, it rhymes, so it's got to be.
It does. Well, yeah.
I'm poking. Because we do use fog machines.
Yeah, you can't see the lights without them, man.
Yeah, and so because you got to have cool lights. But yeah. So some of the things that when he says it, yeah, because he does make jokes about it. And he kind of skinny jeans, fog machines, and claps and all this stuff. But he is poking at the authenticity of it. And so I think and so if you have those things, does it make you unauthentic? No. And if you don't have them, does that make you authentic? No. And so I think, it comes down to the message. Like, are you preaching Christ? Like in making disciples, and he says that in there because that's
biblically speaking, to make disciples is twofold. It's pretty simple. Going to all the nations and baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and teaching them. So discipleship is a twofold thing. It's someone stepping across, like they're not a disciple and they become one, and then they're developed. The church has always historically taken that stance. You go back and look at early church history, they would speak to unbelievers in church services. They would literally start there and they would talk to unbelievers. Everybody was welcome to a church service. I'll die on that hill. Yeah. And of course it's open to the public. It's one of the things I like about it. And when I speak, and I know you do this, I don't always speak directly to unbelievers, but I'm aware they're there, and I talk to them in the same way that if I would talk to an unbeliever sitting across from the table from me in a coffee shop. Yeah. I don't launch in all my Christian lingo and all that kind of thing. But I don't change the message itself. That's silly. But I do try to make it make sense to people that I know in my world left the church many years ago because of their intellectual deficiencies and everything else. So anyway, but
and the thing that the topics that you mentioned, one very politically skewed, but also transgenderism, Roe v. Wade, the Charlie Kirk thing, like all those things are things that we have addressed.
We talked about it, yeah.
And so take
with
that.
Fog in the background,
lots
with
of
lights,
fog. So much fog.
I wasn't wearing skinny jeans, but no one wants to see that.
You couldn't fit in them.
That's exactly true.
Sorry, but no, and so. we can be a church that does have a broad appeal, but in those subjects, people did leave. I mean, people got mad that we talked about certain things.
Oh, big time. And we did a one on homosexuality that we had, yes, we did have to deal with the fallout. And we had some people say we were too liberal and some people say we were too conservative and everything in between.
Which usually means you probably land on the right.
I like to think.
Yeah.
But the fact that we had a fog machine, or I left my shirt untucked exactly like he does, is irrelevant to the ultimate question. Now, let me say a thing about the Catholic. Can I do that now?
Yes.
Is that okay? Okay. Okay.
Let's talk
Yes,
about them.
people are returning because of Catholic reverence. What people don't understand, because I've done a deep dive over the last year in this, is that Catholic worship practices that you see, from the robes, the vestments, the altars, the smoke, all the things, those weren't originally done in the early church, because the church was mainly underground. As a matter of fact, Tertullian points out that the bishop would wear clothes of the common man because they didn't believe in setting themselves aside from the common man. So that's one of the reasons I do it. I'm very uncomfortable with looking like a preacher, because Jesus does the whole thing about the Pharisees wanting the most honored seats, and that stuff scares me to death. So I don't do it. But that was the way of the church up until Constantine. And then when they went public, the way they structured worship was out of the Roman royal court. That's where they got those ideas. And that, in my view, that's not a bad thing. But my point is that in other words, they do things that were very plain to that context they were in. They were used to seeing that stuff.
Yeah.
You ever wonder where the big hats come from? Well,
Marching
Paul didn't walk around in one of them things. Marching band. Paul didn't walk around in one of those. Neither did Jesus. That came much later after Constantine, because that's what you wore in Roman royal court. So that's Eastern Orthodoxy as well. They get those practices from Roman culture, and it's their version of lights and fog machines. So it's like stained glass windows. Stained glass windows weren't a thing in the early church. They became a thing later because that was the artwork. And so we now have tech. We have lighting. I do think lighting looks cool whenever it's fogged up right and all that. And it's an aesthetic. It's the same way a stained glass window is, in my opinion.
Yeah, and again, he's calling out people. Oh yeah, they need to dress up more instead of looking like they just got done with yard work or whatever. But again, it's the relatability, and as you said, like the way he's dressed, it's to relate to that audience. I mean, he's going around in college suits. If he wore a three-piece suit, I don't know what that means, but if he wore a suit and cufflinks and all that, college students aren't going to want to listen to him.
And it may go back. See, I am old enough to have been around before this kind of, the skinny jeans and fog machines came along. And I know where I watched it happen because I was part of bringing it in. But it used to be you had a pulpit that was wooden, and it was, wide, refrigerator back there and books and all this stuff, and the plants everywhere and bright lights and the choir in the back.
Yeah.
Became so unrelatable and so strange that it just started adjusting. And it came out of the Jesus movement of the 60s is what happened.
Yeah. And so I mean, to conclude this, the presentation on stage isn't what's relevant. It's the message of Jesus, and that's going to be relevant. And the way it's done is going to change. I mean, we watched that with Jesus. I mean, to the Pharisees, he was very harsh in how he addressed them, and then to the crowds, he told stories that they didn't understand. I mean, he would adjust the way he talked and the things he talked about to the audience and the crowd, and that didn't make him.
The most insightful things you can ever get if you study Jesus' life and his parables and things like that is to study the cultural background to the audience that was listening to them, and they're phenomenal in how much he understood about the culture he was talking to. There's subtleties inside the Good Samaritan story that are phenomenal. That's what we're really trying to do. We're trying to give the message in a way that connects and bypasses mental barriers in people's lives.
Yeah, and so if somebody does walk in that doesn't have faith, or comes in on the arm of somebody that's like, hey, you need to be here.
Yeah.
And they come in and immediately there's a giant stage with all these wooden seats where the pastors are up there sitting all in their suits, and they're like, wow, this doesn't immediately they check out.
Well, sure. And back in the old days, literally, it was very common for me to invite somebody to church and say, well, I don't have anything to wear. And that was just the cultural assumption. And I've said many times, one of my favorite things about working in a church is you can have on any given Sunday a bank president sitting next to somebody who slept under a bridge last night. And so you want to create an environment, I believe it's incarnational, that you want to create an environment that obviously Jesus was approachable in who he was. And so if you slept under a bridge last night, you can walk into the building and you don't feel like you're just so apart from the society that you can't be touched. And so that's the philosophy around it, right, wrong, or indifferent. But it's hard to get caricatured. But again, it can go too far, but so can the formal stuff.
I just made up a rhyme from what you said. So we're about bank presidents and those without residence. So that makes it true. Take that.
Now
Frank
we've
Turek.
got.
Hey, let us know. Should the church change their ways of fog machines? And
I think the pendulum's going to swing. I now have a problem with that. We do a liturgy reading now. We've adopted that and do some practices that are more formal than we used to back in those days. So
yeah. So let us know in the comments if your youth ministry corrupted you, and if you felt like they did a bad job or a good job, and what they did well. And is the church becoming irrelevant by the way that we dress and lights and all that stuff? Or are they more relevant than they ever have been?
Go IU.
IU. All right. See you next time. I'm Chris.
I'm Brett.